There are things you never say out loud. They sit in the corners of your mind, quiet, unmoving, but always there, like the crack in a mirror you've learned to look past, but never forget. You laugh, you work, you survive, and you think that's enough. But every now and then, a silence falls, a familiar emptiness returns, and something inside you whispers, you're still running. You've built a life on avoiding, on moving faster than your fear. You call it strength, maturity, independence, but beneath it all is a buried scream, frozen in time. You repress what you can't face, not because you're weak, but because you were once too small to hold it. So you buried it instead. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. You were a child when it began. Maybe you don't recall the moment, but you remember the feeling. The air growing heavy, the sound of footsteps that meant danger, or silence that meant abandonment. You remember learning that love could be taken. That presence wasn't permanent. And so your mind split. One part learned to smile, the other part went underground. And now you still live in that split. You tell yourself it's over, that you're past it. But you wake up exhausted. You sabotage closeness. You attract chaos. And when someone truly sees you, you want to run. Not because you don't want love, but because part of you still believes it's not safe. You've become an expert at pretending. Pretending you're fine. Pretending you don't care. Pretending you don't need. You say you're over it. But when someone leaves, you feel 10 years old again. You feel the panic, the drop in your chest, the aching scream behind your calm voice. And still, you keep performing. Because if you stop, you'll fall apart. You've mistaken survival for healing. But repression is not healing. It's a pause, a freeze frame, a defense. Necessary, yes, but temporary. What you bury will grow teeth. It will seep into your choices, your relationships, your identity, until one day your body speaks what your mouth cannot. Through anxiety, rage, numbness, addiction, projection.
Do you ever feel like someone finally sees the part of you you've always hidden? Here, you don't have to hide anymore. You're safe now. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so we can keep walking this path together. Thank you.
You're not crazy. You're carrying what you couldn't express. Can you be honest now? Not with others, with yourself. Can you name what you've never dared to feel? Can you hold what you once had to escape? Can you finally face it, not to drown in it, but to unchain yourself from it? This isn't about reliving the pain. It's about reclaiming the parts of you lost in the shadows. The self that never got to speak. The child that never got held. The version of you who had to pretend to be fine while dying inside. They still live in you, and they are still waiting. You repress what you can't face. But what if you could face it now? The wound is not the enemy. Denial is. And what if I told you that your greatest power is hidden in what you fear the most? What happens when you stop running? Some people disappear without ever leaving. They are still present, still functioning, still waking up, still working. But something essential is missing. A light behind the eyes, a sense of self, a pulse of presence. It's like watching someone wear their own body like a uniform they forgot how to take off. Have you felt it? That hollow silence in your chest that no achievement can fill. That eerie numbness when everything's going well, but you still feel absent. Not sad, just gone. You smile in photos, you answer emails, you even laugh with friends. But deep inside, you know, something in you has long since gone quiet. And it's not laziness, it's not depression, it's dissociation, it's self-abandonment. It's what happens when you've repressed so much of your truth for so long that even you stopped checking in on yourself. This is what happens when repression becomes identity. There's a kind of death that happens while you're still alive. It's not physical, it's psychological, emotional, spiritual. The death of authenticity. You started dying the moment you decided your truth was too dangerous to show. Maybe it began in childhood, when anger was punished, when tears were shamed, when needs were mocked. So you learned to shrink, to adapt, to be who they needed you to be. You became a version of yourself that could survive. Polite, productive, palatable. You called it growing up, but it was more like shutting down. You stopped asking what you needed. You stopped expressing what you felt. You stopped dreaming too loudly because someone somewhere taught you that your truth was inconvenient, embarrassing, too much. And slowly you faded. Not all at once, but in pieces. A compromise here, a silence there, a smile when you wanted to scream. Until one day, you looked in the mirror and couldn't find the person you used to be. Just a mask with habits. This is what repression does. It doesn't just hide the pain, it hides you. It buries your instincts, your desires, your essence, until everything you do becomes a performance for belonging, and everything you avoid becomes a scream from the self you locked away. You learn to fake wholeness. You become excellent at success, but terrible at presence. You impress everyone, but feel nothing. You get everything you wanted and feel empty holding it. Because deep down, the one holding it isn't really you. It's the avatar, the mask, the surviving persona. Carl Jung called this the persona, the self you wear for the world. But the tragedy is when the mask becomes more real than the face beneath it. You stop feeling joy because you stopped feeling anything. Not because you're broken, but because you've disconnected from your core, the source, the soul. And the soul cannot be faked. It demands truth. It demands embodiment. It demands that you return. But how do you return to something you abandoned? You begin by noticing. Noticing the places you lie to yourself, the roles you play to be accepted, the conversations where your throat tightens because you're silencing the truth again. Then comes the grief. For every moment you abandoned yourself just to be loved. For every version of you that learned to stay silent to keep the peace. For all the times you chose harmony over honesty, attention over alignment, survival over self. Grief is a sign of awakening, of returning, of remembering. And as you grieve, you begin to hear a faint whisper inside. The voice you buried. The real you. Not the perfect one. Not the likable one. The honest one. The raw one. The one who's been watching from behind your eyes all along, waiting for you to come back. You repress what you can't face. And when you do it long enough, you forget who you are beneath the act. But forgetting is not erasure. What's real in you is never gone. Just waiting. Waiting beneath the silence, beneath the mask, beneath the life built on keeping the peace. So what happens if, instead of performing, you pause. If instead of proving, you listen. If instead of hiding, you return. What happens if you come home to yourself? There's a moment when the body moves before the mind understands. When your hand pulls away. When your breath shortens. When your gaze drops to the floor. It's not conscious, it's reflex. An echo of something old, something unresolved. This is what trauma does. It teaches the body to respond to the past, even when the present is safe. And this is where repression lives. Not just in memory, but in movement, in posture, in the way your muscles tighten around silence. You think you're just uncomfortable, but you're actually haunted. Haunted by conversations you never had, by truths you never spoke, by needs you convinced yourself were too much. You think you've let it go, but your nervous system remembers. It remembers the night you cried alone, the time you weren't believed, the moment your trust cracked and never stitched back. And so your body builds a shield around your chest, around your voice, around your heart. You call it independence, but it's just isolation with better branding. You don't reach out, not because you don't want to, but because somewhere inside, you already decided no one will come. This is how repression becomes reality, not because it's true, but because you begin to live as if it is. You start making choices from fear instead of desire. You accept less because you expect less. You dismiss what you want before you even name it. You don't ask for closeness. You wait to be chosen. You don't say, "This hurt me." You say, "It's fine." You don't say, "I need you." You say, "I'm good on my own." But beneath it all, the ache remains. And the longer it goes unnamed, the more it controls you. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." So ask yourself, what patterns keep repeating? Do you always attract the unavailable? Do you always self-destruct when things get too good? Do you always play the caretaker, then resent the weight? These are not coincidences. They are echoes. Echoes of unprocessed pain. Until you go to the root, the surface will keep bleeding. But going to the root is terrifying because it means slowing down, feeling what you've avoided, touching the grief under your anger, the fear under your silence, the longing under your pride. And grief is not linear. It comes in waves, some small, some tidal. You'll think you're done, then feel undone all over again. That's not regression. That's depth. The deeper you go, the more real you become. And in that reality, you'll start to notice small things. Moments where your voice shakes, but you keep speaking. Moments where your body wants to shut down, but you stay. Moments where you say, "I'm not okay," and let someone hold you. These are not signs of weakness. These are cracks in the armor, places where light begins to enter. Healing doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like collapsing in someone's arms and not apologizing for the weight. Sometimes it looks like crying after years of numbness. Sometimes it looks like saying no even when you're terrified to disappoint. Sometimes it looks like choosing yourself before anyone else. You begin to reclaim not just your past, but your right to feel, to take up space, to matter. And in doing so, you create a new reality, a reality where your wounds don't define you, where your emotions are not threats, but messengers, where your presence becomes your power. You repress what you can't face. But now, you've started facing it. And in doing so, you've begun to remember who you were before the mask. The journey doesn't end here, because remembering is just the first step. Next comes integration, embodiment, becoming. So ask yourself this: if you no longer had to perform, what would you create? If you no longer had to please, who would you become? If you no longer had to hide, how brightly would you shine? What if the reason you feel stuck is because you're still trying to become someone you never were? Not the true you, but the you they needed. The one who didn't cry too much, didn't want too much, didn't take up too much space. You shaped yourself into that version so many times, you started believing it was real. But it wasn't. That version of you wasn't born. It was built on fear, on survival, on repression. And now, the structure is collapsing. You feel it in your body, the exhaustion of holding it all together. You feel it in your soul, the quiet scream begging to be heard. You feel it in your relationships, the dissonance between what you say and what you mean. This is the death of the false self. And it's terrifying, because letting go of the false self means stepping into the unknown. Who will you be when you stop performing? Who will stay when you stop pleasing? Who will love you when you stop being who they expect? These are not small questions. They are identity-shattering. And yet, these questions are the doorway to freedom. Freedom doesn't come from doing more. It comes from undoing. Undoing the lies you told to be liked. Undoing the masks you wore to be accepted. Undoing the habits you formed to be safe. You can't reclaim your life while still rehearsing your performance. Integration begins the moment you pause. The moment you stop running long enough to ask, does this even feel like me? Not, is it good? Not, is it acceptable? But, is it mine? You begin to see how often you've lived for others, how your yes was a maybe, how your smile was a silence, how your strength was a shield. Carl Jung called this work individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, separate from what others projected onto you. It's not a rebellion, it's a return to the original, to the untamed, to the unshaped essence beneath all the adaptation. And returning to your essence means confronting all the parts you've disowned, the anger you buried, the desires you denied, the grief you never allowed, the dreams you abandoned because someone told you they were ridiculous. You won't reclaim your soul in comfort. You'll reclaim it in the fire of honesty, of loss, of radical self-responsibility. Because it's easier to blame the world than to admit I've been complicit in my own suppression. But that admission isn't shameful. It's powerful. It's the point where you stop waiting to be saved and start saving yourself. And with every truth you speak, every no you finally say, every boundary you hold, every piece of yourself you bring back from exile, you rebuild. Not the performance, the presence, not the mask, the self. And slowly, something shifts. People around you react differently. Some come closer, some leave. But it doesn't hurt like it used to. Because now, when they leave, they're not leaving the real you. They're leaving the version of you that never existed. So here you are, not fixed, not perfect, but real. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough, because you've stopped pretending, you've started returning, and maybe, just maybe, you're beginning to belong. Not to them, but to yourself. And in that belonging, you begin to see this was never about healing to be liked. It was about healing to be whole. Now comes the final threshold. What does it look like to live from this wholeness? We'll find out in the next part. It's one thing to heal. It's another to live healed. You've done the work. You've looked inward, torn through layers, and stared into the void of yourself. But now the world is watching. Now the spotlight is on. And the question becomes, can you walk in your truth when no one else is clapping? Wholeness is not an idea. It's a practice. It's in the way you wake up and greet your own reflection. It's in the way you hold your boundaries when no one else understands them. It's in the way you stop chasing and start choosing. Healing isn't the end of pain. It's the end of abandoning yourself in pain. Now, every situation becomes a mirror. Will you revert to the old roles or remain rooted in the new you? Your ego will scream for familiar ground. Your mind will reach for masks it already knows. But your soul, quiet, unshaken, will whisper, stay. Stay in your body. Stay in your voice. Stay in your knowing. There's no applause for this. No spotlight. No stage. Just you, again and again, choosing what's real over what's rewarded. That's the final test. Not whether you've healed, but whether you can live as someone who no longer needs to be anything but whole. You start designing your life differently, not around safety, but around truth. Not around acceptance, but around alignment. And as you do, some things fall away. People, patterns, paths you once swore were yours. But loss becomes less frightening when you realize nothing true can be taken from you. So you walk, not perfectly, but powerfully. And the world begins to adjust. Because the moment you stop chasing validation, you become magnetic. Not because you're performing, but because you're real. That's the paradox. When you finally stop proving, you start radiating. You're not louder, you're clearer, you're not tougher, you're truer. You're not more. You're enough. And enough is undeniable. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." You are living that privilege now, not as an idea, but as a breath, a step, a presence. This is the end of hiding. This is the end of pretending. You've stopped repressing what you couldn't face. Now you're embracing what you finally can. And in doing so, you've become the one thing the world cannot shape: yourself. Welcome home.